It's been quite a while since the last major update for Minecraft. 1.21, the Tricky Trials update, released over a year ago now, which is a pretty big gap of time to go without a new update for the game. Of course, we haven't been completely abandoned, as we have been getting game drops every couple months. As much as I may love stuff like the Copper Golem, Happy Ghast, and Creaking, I am personally a bigger fan of these huge new additions to the game. Luckily for us that like the old update system, Mojang does still plan on making big updates. The wait between them is just going to be a bit longer. With no indication on when that update is going to come out though, the expectations for 1.22 are just going to keep rising. But while these expectations continue to build, I thought it'd be fun to reflect back on all of the other previous major updates the game has received. Starting from 1.0, there have been 22 major updates released for the game, and with so many updates, some are bound to be worse than others. So today, I'm going to be ranking every major Minecraft update from the worst to the best. Now obviously this list is extremely difficult to put together due to how different a lot of these updates are and how much content many of them have. To make things simpler, I'll be judging these based on how good I think they are for standard survival mode. Many updates include features that only pertain to creative, data pack makers, and so on, but since I'm not super familiar with that portion of the game, I thought it was best to just not factor them too much into my personal ranking. Also, I won't be able to mention every new addition or change in an update, but I'll make sure to mention the most important ones. Sorry in advance to the light blue glazed terracotta fans for not bringing you up in detail. The final note I want to make is that I'm starting from 1.0 just because that's when the full version of the game was released. Maybe someday in the future I could do an alpha and beta ranking, but I think just the standard updates work for this list. Oh yeah, and also sometimes my footage of a feature won't be in the update I'm talking about, but that shouldn't affect what I'm saying at all. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and let's jump right in. Starting off, we have an update that I would be shocked if anyone disagrees with. 22.1.1. This is by far the smallest update we'll be seeing today. I mean, it doesn't even have an official name. The main new addition for this update were spawn eggs, and it's kind of funny seeing how little mobs are in the game at this point. I mean, we didn't even have tadpoles. How did we play like this? Now, spawn eggs are undeniably an important feature for creative mode. If you were listening in the intro, I said this was for survival mode. Yeah, so due to that criteria, the already small update just got way smaller. A few new biomes were added here, but by new, I mean slightly tweaked versions of old biomes, so who cares? Apples can finally be dropped from oak leaves, so you don't have to rely on finding a stronghold or killing Notch to get them. 8 of the 9 music discs added in 1.0 were now finally obtainable in survival mode by having a creeper get killed by a skeleton. Notably, they didn't let 11 get obtained like this for some reason until 1.4, despite it being in the game. It was probably too scary or something, I don't know. And finally, what I would say is probably the biggest survival mode addition were the bow enchantments. Power, Punch, Infinity, and Flame were all added to the game, which are obviously quite helpful. But yeah, that's about it for anything worth noting. Superflat was also added here, but I wasn't sure how to count that for this list, so I still think 1.1 is definitely the weakest major update. 1.10, the Frostburn update. While I do think 1.1 is worse, 1.10 is the update I dislike the most in my heart. This update came out at a time where Minecraft was taking a pretty big hit popularity-wise. Adding polar bears certainly didn't help. This is another update that is extremely tiny, and the features added here only barely put it above 1.1 for me. 3 new mobs are added, being the polar bear, husk, and stray. While I like having the biome variants for the zombie and skeleton, I definitely don't think they're enough to carry an entire update. Polar bears, on the other hand, are one of the game's most forgettable mobs. There were also 4 new blocks added here. I can't say I've seen many builds using netherwart blocks, but at least bone blocks and red nether brick are more useful. Though keep in mind, this update didn't add the variations for red nether brick, so it was literally just the block. The most useful thing added here was probably magma block, since it's at least something with a fairly unique functionality to hurt whoever walks on it. Bubble columns weren't added until 1.13 though, so it doesn't have that use yet. So yeah, this is just an extremely underwhelming update with a lot of underbaked features. 1.15, the Buzzy Bees update. Unlike the last one, I don't dislike this update at all. It was clearly just a small bonus release between 2 of the game's biggest updates. As the name suggests here, there's so much. Pretty much everything related to bees was released in this update. Now, I'll be honest, I still rarely touch bee stuff in the game today, but there were a couple pretty important things added here. Beehives are a surprisingly lovely building block, especially for floors, but the big thing is of course honey blocks. This is extremely useful for redstone contraptions. It works like a slime block where it can stick to other blocks next to it, but slime blocks and honey blocks don't stick to each other. This property opens up a lot of possibilities for pissing contraptions like flying machines and easier doors. This stuff could be done before with just slime, but not nearly to this extent or ease of use. Honey also has the unique property of partially sticking entities to it, which can also be quite useful. However, if you aren't much of a redstoner, there's really not much here for you. While I do think honey blocks are probably the biggest feature we've seen so far, it's definitely not enough to carry this update higher by itself. 1.2. Back to updates that don't have a name, we have another fairly small one, but I do think it's able to slightly surpass the bees. The main addition to this update were jungle biomes and jungle wood. With the biome also came ocelots, which are pretty useless today, but were the only way to get cats at the time. time. Now all of this by itself probably would have put this below the Buzzy Bees update, however 1.2.4 made a pretty big change by adding new plank colors for birch, spruce, and junglewood. Before that, while the logs looked different, they would all still give oak planks. Seeing as having a variety of wood types is pretty important in building, I'd say that was a huge change. As for some of the smaller additions, iron golems, redstone lamps, sandstone variants, bottles of enchanting, and fire charges all made their debuts here. Chiseled stone bricks were also added here, but they were creative mode only, so... If all of that still hasn't convinced you that this is the best update we've seen so far, this update added desert wells. Overall, still quite a small release, but having some big features like the new wood planks helped this out a ton. 1.6 the horse update. Now, I personally don't use a ton of horses while playing, but I know there's a good chunk of the community that does to this day. Before the Elytra, they were even more prominent, so I think that makes them a pretty great addition. That's of course on top of their variants like donkeys, mules, skeleton horses, and zombie horses. The latter two were creative mode exclusive at the time, but they did eventually get added for survival. Well, at least one of them did. Now, if this was just horses, I probably would have put this lower, but I think the other additions here were pretty strong. Carpet and terracotta were added here, and it's always nice to see new colored blocks for building purposes. Name tags, and especially leads, are very important tools for dealing with mobs. They honestly might be the biggest things added in this update. Chests were also added to the nether fortress, which isn't a huge deal, but I've always appreciated this as it made them much more fun to explore. Finally, coal blocks and hay bales were added, which are mildly cool. Definitely would still classify this as a small update, but I think we are starting to get a larger amount of features that actually matter now. 1.3. Not only have we made it to our final update without a name, this was also the first update that I started playing the game in. I was watching the game for a long time, but it wasn't until this update that I got the chance to play the game for myself. I distinctly remember being very disappointed that Mario wasn't here because I thought mods were real. Anyway, this update sort of expanded on what we saw in 1.2 by finally adding stairs and slabs for all the new wood types. Similarly, sandstone stairs were also added here. As for some fully new features, ender chests were added, which are some of the most valuable tools for keeping items safe in multiplayer and also just having more storage. Book and quills are also thrown in here, which are a fun feature but nothing I'd call useful at the time. But the biggest features have to do with the game's structures. Both the Jungle Temple and Desert Temple were added, two of the game's most iconic locations. They both make the world feel so much more fun to explore and really help complete their respective biomes. To go with them, tripwire hooks and placeable cocoa beans were also added in here too. Cocoa beans were in the game before this, but you could only get them from dungeon chests. Huge day for cookie fans. But what I would say is the biggest new feature of the update was the introduction of emeralds and villager trading. Villagers were in the game well before this, but it wasn't until 1.3 where they could actually do anything useful. Now granted, the trading at this point was not nearly at the level of what it is today with being able to refresh workstations and get enchantment books, but villager trading at all is still a really good addition to the game. So for expanding a bit on the game's more lacking features, I think 1.3 was pretty decent. 1.19 the wild update. Here is another update that I would say is somewhat infamous in the Minecraft community, as many people like to call it Caves and Cliffs Part 3. The main highlight of this update is of course the Ancient City, Warden, and Skulk stuff. This was all originally planned to be in 1.17 but had to be delayed. Honestly though, while I think the Ancient Cities are cool game design wise, I don't feel like they do enough for me to be very excited to go there. Swift Sneak is cool, but the other exclusive loot added for this structure just isn't that important in my opinion. I haven't ever felt the need to really risk my life going into an ancient city, so I don't think it's able to bring this version up super high. Maybe once they finally add whatever this portal is for, I can feel much more excited to go there. Honestly, what's really carrying this update this high is the stuff with the new mangrove swamp biome. Not only do I really like mangrove wood, but frogs were a great addition as they let us get frog lights, some of the best lighting blocks in the game. Mud also came with the biome, and it's also an extremely useful tool for builders. Some smaller features also include goat horns, chest boats, and the allay. Although I think with copper golems, allay's only use is to be used in torture chambers. In the lens of the modern Minecraft updates, yeah, this one is definitely weaker, but with every update as a whole considered, it still added a decent amount. 1.20 the Trails and Tales update. Following the wild update right up with the update that came after it, we have what many consider to be Caves and Cliffs Part 4. That's because archaeology is the main focal point of this update, and that was also originally supposed to be in 1.17. Well, regardless, I do think archaeology is a fun mechanic even if it's not groundbreaking. It's a good way to add new functionality to several of the game's older structures, especially since many of them get their own set of unique pottery shards. This is most apparent in the new structure being the trail ruins. Now I do think they are a little too rare for what they give. They're fun enough to go through, but since they're so hidden, it certainly makes this update feel a whole lot smaller. On top of the sherds, armor trims are also added in this update, which again add more reason to explore some of the game's older structures. Although this did bring with it the netherite upgrade template, and I'm still very heavily against its inclusion. On a much more positive note though, bamboo wood and cherry wood are great, along with the new hanging signs. All of these are extremely useful building blocks, even if the wood colors are a bit more on the niche end. There were also 2 mobs added here, the first of which being the sniffer. He's honestly a bit underwhelming with how little flowers he can find. Camels on the other hand are great because they let us play camel drop. Overall, not a ton of big stuff here, but I do like the updates to old structures quite a bit to make them more fun to explore. 14, 1.8, the Bountiful update. In my head, I always mix this one up with 1.7, probably because both of their names don't really describe the update much at all. Like, if you could guess that sunflowers were added in 1.8 based on the Bountiful update name, you're wrong because they were in 1.7. Anyway, what did this update actually add? First up, we got the new stone types, granite, diorite, and andesite, along with their polished versions. All 3 of these have been quite helpful for building over the years, though I definitely prefer andesite the most. Ocean monuments, along with all other blocks and mobs, are added in this update as well. Prismarine isn't my favorite thing to build with, but I like having the option, plus sea lanterns are actually really good. Guardian farms were, and still are, extremely common forms of XP farms, which made the structure pretty valuable to find and keep going back to. Plus, it was nice to see sponges finally get added to survival after being in the game since Minecraft Classic Edition. Speaking of XP, enchanting got a bit of an overhaul here as it now requires lapis, will actually show one of the enchantments you will get, and it only takes up to 3 levels from the player. Before this, enchanting was much more painful and luck based, so it was a very appreciated change. Banners were also in this update, which are always fun to decorate with. Red sandstone and its variants were thrown in here too, along with fences, fence gates, and doors for all the wood types. Yeah, it's kinda crazy how we only had oak variants up until that point, so it was great to finally see these get added. And of course I mentioned honey blocks earlier, so it's important that I bring up slime blocks as well. These had a massive impact on redstone contraptions due to being able to push and pull several blocks at a time. Flying machines and bigger piston doors were basically made possible due to these blocks. And on top of all of that, there was plenty of smaller stuff like rabbits, mutton, armor stands, endermites, and so on. We are definitely starting to break into the updates that had a much bigger impact on the game. 13, 1.4, the Pretty Scary update. As the name suggests, this update added a lot of pretty spooky features like carrots, item frames, oak buttons, and cobblestone walls! Okay, but in all seriousness, the main appeal of this update was the introduction of the Wither skeleton, Wither, and Beacon. Seeing as the Wither is Minecraft's secondary boss, that's a pretty big addition, and going for the Wither is always a fun side thing to do. Beacons are an essential tool when working on bigger projects, so the boss is well worth going for. Witches, witch huts, and bats were also added in this update to fit with the spooky theme, which aren't the most helpful things in the world, but do add a bit of character. Anvils, on the other hand, are much more useful, especially since 1.4.6 finally added enchantment books. That made getting the right stuff for your armor and tools far easier and way less luck dependent. Some other smaller additions in this update include potatoes, flower pots, pumpkin pie, invisibility and night vision potions, the weight music disc, and fireworks. Additionally, while it's not technically relevant to the ranking since it's creative mode exclusive, I feel like it would be a crime to not mention command blocks. These are one of the most essential tools in map making, and if they were part of the criteria here, 1.4 would be a lot higher on the list because of them. But since we're just looking at survival stuff, I think this update came with a lot of useful new resources and a fun new boss fight. 12, 1.18, the Caves and Cliffs update, part 2. This is often considered by the community to be the Caves and Cliffs update, part 2, because that's what it's named. This was probably the single hardest update to place on the entire list. If you weren't around for it, essentially the Caves and Cliffs update was split into 2 parts. As I said earlier, some elements snuck into other updates, but for the sake of this argument, it was split into 2. 1.17 would add all of the new blocks, mobs, items, and so on, whereas 1.18 would add all of the new cave and mountain generation. So for that reason, the only new item in 1.18 is the Other Side music disc, which is a banger, but obviously wouldn't carry the update this high. We have to pretty much solely rank this based on the new world generation. Now, if it was just adding a biome or 2, this would be really low, but the Caves and Cliffs generation changes were legitimately game-changing. Caves are so much more expansive now and actually fun to explore, and that's pretty important considering caves are such a big part of the game. I didn't hate the old caves, but these new ones genuinely put what we had before to shame. Not to mention mention actually getting cave biomes like the lush and dripstone caves. That's on top of this update changing the world height to go down to Y-64 and up to Y319. Plus, all of the new mountain biomes made the overworld generation much more exciting as well, though caves definitely got the biggest benefit of the two in my opinion. So while there weren't really any new features, the new world generation is 100% big enough to bring this update quite high on the list. Really, it's just a shame that 1.17 and 1.18 had to be separate, since if they were combined, that would have easily been one of the top placing entries on the list. 11. 1.9 The Combat Update. This is quite possibly the most hated update in Minecraft history, and you're all a bunch of crybabies. Okay, obviously the main update here was to Minecraft's combat. Before this update, you could just spam click your sword to deal the max amount of damage, which is still the case on many multiplayer servers. With 1.9 though, you have to take a bit of time between your attacks, and to be honest, I find this one to be much more interesting. It gives you a reason to use a faster but slightly weaker sword or the slower but stronger axe. The addition of the offhand was also very helpful to not only add shield, which I like using a lot, but also to help when doing many different things in the game like building or mining. And that's just the mechanic stuff in this update. We got quite a few actual features here too. First off, the best enchantment in the game was added in this update. Frostwalker. Oh, and mending, I guess. There are now boat variants for the different wood types, path blocks, tipped arrows for all the different potion types, and even beetroots for the 3 fans it has. Most importantly though, came the update to the end. The dragon fight got a massive overhaul, giving it new attacks and also making it harder in places by caging some of the crystals. Plus you can also respawn the dragon if you so choose. Defeating the ender dragon now also unlocks the outer end islands and end cities. This brought with it a ton of new building blocks and of course the elytra. Now what's holding 1.9 back a bit from being even higher is just the fact that the elytra wasn't quite as broken yet and shulker boxes weren't in the game. The elytra's firework functionality and shulker boxes weren't added until 1.11, so that did hold 1.9 down. However, this still added a ton of great features, and while I certainly understand some people being upset with the combat changes, I think in this day and age, the new combat is so much better. The ender dragon feels a lot better and more rewarding to fight too, so maybe controversially, I think 1.9 is great. 10. 1.12 The World of Color Update. Okay, this one might be a little high, but I like colors, sue me. This update was all about adding a ton of colored blocks, which I always find incredibly useful. Concrete, concrete powder, glazed terracotta, and beds were added for all 16 of the game's dye colors. This allowed for a ton more customization than we had before. Bed colors were great to really make bedrooms feel like your own. Concrete I've always loved as it's nice to have a nearly solid block of one color. Glazed terracotta is definitely a lot more niche, but it does still have its fans. Matching the color theme, parrots were also added in this update. They're not really useful, but I do find them cute and I like that they can dance. Now all of that is already great from a building perspective, but I also wanted to add on 2 new systems that were in this update. 1.12 introduced the crafting book, which I absolutely adore as an easier way to craft things much faster and without having to memorize recipes. Advancements also replaced achievements in this update, and while the systems are similar, I do definitely prefer the advancements. So for having great sets of blocks and extremely useful new systems for survival mode, I think 1.12 is a bit underrated. 9. 1.11 The Exploration Update. This one was weird for me to place because I remembered not loving this update when it was released. Not that it was bad, it just felt like a bit of a nothing burger. Looking at what it added though, there's some good stuff here. The reason I think I didn't like it was because this added the woodland mansions, which are certainly cool, but they're a bit too rare and not that useful. They were the only place to get totems in this update though, so that is definitely worth noting. Raids weren't in the game yet, so if you wanted to fight Vindicators, Evokers, and Vexes, you had to come here. While I didn't love the mansions, the other changes in this update were pretty massive. Llamas were also added and, okay, I mean they're not that exciting. The real big one starts with the Observer. This is one of the most useful redstone components ever added to the game as it's able to detect block updates in front of its face. Yes, you could detect this before observers were added, but that required a bit of a complex setup. Observer simplified it so much that it quickly became one of the most used redstone components in the entire game. Look up almost any redstone tutorial and about 80% of the time an observer is going to be included somewhere. Additionally, as I mentioned in the 1.9 segment, shulker boxes were added to the game which are incredibly useful in carrying more items at once. With how many items are in Minecraft now and how big people like to build, having a portable chest is a huge feature. This is also the update that made the elytra insanely powerful by letting it work with fireworks. This completely changed the late game of Minecraft as people actually had to set up farms for fireworks. I know a lot of people don't like how good the elytra is, but as for some smaller stuff, 1.11 also brought over some explorer maps, iron nuggets, the curse enchantments, and the sweeping edge enchantment. So while this may not have had the amount of features as some of the other updates this high, the quality and importance of some of them are too big to ignore. 8. 1.7 The Update That Changed the World. Despite me always confusing this with 1.8, this did manage to place up quite a bit higher. The way this update changed the world was by adding in quite a few new biomes. Mesas were added in order to work with the newly added red sand along with the terracotta from 1.6. Ice spikes were a new variation on the ice plains biome which used the brand new packed ice block, and it's also just one of the coolest looking biomes in my opinion. Several new biomes were added to feature the brand new flowers, and there were quite a bit which helped outdoor decoration a ton. New taiga variants were also thrown in to not only feature the new podzol block but also the new 2x2 taiga trees, which are super helpful to grow whenever you need a ton of wood. But speaking of wood, the biggest biomes were definitely the savanna and roofed forest. That's because they each had their own brand new wood type with acacia and dark oak, and as I've said plenty of times, new wood is always a highlight. Especially when that new wood is dark oak, one of my favorites in the game to this very day. I don't care about acacia though. And that's not even all the biomes this update added, so it's safe to say that there was a good amount of content in that regard. But even outside of new biome stuff, there was a good amount of other features added as well. Stained glass and stained glass panes were new and allowed for a lot of needed window customization. Fishing also got a total overhaul this update, which actually made it pretty fun to do. You can not only enchant your fishing rod now with lure and luck of the sea, but you can even catch new fish like the salmon, pufferfish, and clownfish. That's on top of a ton of trash and treasure items too, so I think it's safe to say that this update was certainly bountiful. No, I was supposed to say it changed the world. Ugh. 7. 1.13 The Update Aquatic. This is the update that many consider to be the catalyst for the modern Minecraft revival. I could certainly understand that perspective because this was a legitimately very strong update to bring people back to the game. As the name suggests, this was heavily focused on actually making the oceans interesting. Before this, oceans were basically just water with nothing interesting. But now this update added several new biomes that actually gave some variety in the ocean. Plant life like kelp, seagrass, and coral were added to make the ocean surface much less plain. Structures like ocean ruins, shipwrecks, and buried treasure actually gave some encouragement for players to go into the water for their exploration. Each of them gives pretty solid loot too, so it made the ocean not feel like a waste of space. Significantly more water mobs are also thrown in here. All of the fish we could get from fishing before are now made into actual mobs. Turtles let us get the brand new turtle helmet to breathe underwater longer. Dolphins let us swim much faster, and the drowned added a hostile presence to the ocean which could also reward the player with a trident. The trident was a fantastic new weapon type to not only attack things from a long range, but also potentially move really fast through water, or get the power of lightning to more easily obtain the game's mob heads. If you wanted, you could even try and get a conduit, which sort of worked like a less powerful underwater beacon. The prismarine blocks were also given slabs and stairs now, which made them far more useful. Finally, for the notable water changes, bubble columns were a huge addition to make very simple and efficient elevators. But this update didn't stop at the ocean, it also gave us a lot of new wood blocks to play around with. Not only were the bark blocks finally made obtainable in survival after being in the game since 1.3.1, but strip variants were also added, being some of my favorite building blocks in the game. This also finally added buttons, pressure plates, and most importantly trapdoor variants for all of the wood types. And in addition to all of that, this update also added the phantom. 22. 1.13 The Update Aquatic. This update really showed just how powerful the focused update approach could be, and because it had so much room to work with in the oceans, I think this is without a doubt one of the game's best. 6. 1.17 The Caves and Cliffs Update Part 1. Like I mentioned with 1.18, this one tragically lost out on being higher due to only being half of its update. With that being said, it's still a very good half. Yes, we didn't get the new world generation yet, and we had to rely on some pretty scuffed methods to get most of the new blocks. Small drip leaves were exclusive to wandering traders, it was a dark time. But the new content here was incredible. We got 2 new ores in the form of amethyst and copper. Amethyst could definitely use a lot more uses, but I like tinted glass and the spyglass as fuck. Whoa, wait, did you guys see that? Copper was a little better, having a large variety of building blocks along with lightning rods, but it would take a bit before it became a really solid resource. Raw gold and iron were added here, which was very nice to let those 2 ores finally work with a fortune enchantment. We got several blocks relating to the new caves and mountain biomes that came in 1.18, such as moss, azalea, drip leaf, drip stone, powdered snow, glowberries, spore blossoms, and more. New mobs are also introduced here like the goat, axolotl, and glow squid. Even though they do get a lot of hate, being able to make item frames and signs glow is pretty useful, I'd say. Speaking of glowing, candles are also added here, which are a nice way to add a tiny bit of color to builds. But for me, the stuff that really brought this update so high was deep slate. This might just be my favorite family of blocks in the entire game. Not only am I a fan of darker colors, but the sheer variety and different textures deep slate has can make it very versatile. Honestly, since this update dropped, I think about 80% of my builds have used some sort of deep slate block. So while this update was quite scuffed without the new generation, the high amount of new building materials and ores are easily enough for me to still bring this up fairly high on the list. 5. 1.14 The Village and Pillage Update. This following immediately after the update Aquatic truly set in how back Minecraft was after a few years of a lackluster performance. This gave a massive overhaul to villages in a number of different ways. All of the buildings have been redesigned completely, even getting unique variations per biome a village could appear in. While I and many others have a ton of nostalgia for the old village buildings, the large variety that we have now is certainly a lot better. To go with the new villages, villagers also received a major overhaul to their trading. Now each villager gets a job based on a nearby workstation, and by breaking the station, you're able to refresh villager trades. This completely changed how many people play the game, especially when it comes to getting enchantments like mending, since villagers are pretty much the only reliable source to get it consistently. Wandering traders also joined in with this update, and while they're not insanely helpful, I do like their inclusion. On top of just how overpowered the new trading system was for getting resources, many of the new workstations themselves are also extremely useful. The stone cutter might just be my favorite, as it allows you to easily cut any stone block that has variations without losing as much as you would in a crafting table. To go with that, a ton of new stairs, slabs, and walls were added to the game, and it's safe to say that all of those are extremely useful building blocks. Grindstones were also an essential tool, as they finally allow you to unenchant your items, which was a problem with the game ever since enchanting was added. The loom, blast furnace, smoker, barrel, and cartography table were all also useful in their own ways. The fletching table, and that's not even touching on some of the other fantastic building blocks like new flowers, sign variations for all the wood, campfires, bells, sweet berries, and most importantly of all, lanterns. That is probably my absolute favorite lighting block in the game, so that was a great addition. And all of this is before even getting to the second half of the update with the pillagers. With them, they brought both outposts and the new raid events, which are a lot of fun to do. It's especially nice since the rewards are pretty worth it as you get better trades, emeralds, and totems of undying. Crossbows are also a new weapon added with the pillager, and while I don't use them a ton, it's always nice to get more options. There was just so much in this update that it's hard to name everything. I mean, I didn't even get to stuff like the cats, foxes, and pandas that were added here too. Again, this was another fantastic showcase of what Mojang can do when they really set their mind to improving a certain aspect of the game. 4. 1.21 The Tricky Trials Update. Here we have our most recent major release as of making this video. If we're going to go a while without anything new, at least they went out with a bang. This is sort of like the update Aquatic and Village and Pillage, where it mostly focuses on one thing, but this time it's about adding something completely new. The trial chambers are, in my opinion, the best implemented structure in the entire game. Its combat focus and large scale makes it incredibly unique from anything else. The best part about it is of course the fact that it's built around multiplayer, which is a struggle the game has faced for many years. Now the amount of mobs and loot you get correlates to the number of players inside, making them extremely fun to run through multiple times with friends. Ominous bottles were also added this update, which lets you affect the difficulty of the trial chambers while inside. And that's not even getting to all the stuff you can find here. The new copper and tough blocks are all extremely nice additions, especially the tough, since I always felt like that block was missing a lot of functionality. The breeze and bogged are two new mobs here, which help make the structure stand out, on top of the breeze rewarding the player with wind charges. Those are a lot of fun to use with the brand new mace weapon, which deals more damage based on how far you fall. While I wouldn't say it's the most useful weapon, it's probably the most fun weapon, which I think is also a very valuable trait. Several new potions, armor trims, pottery shards, and banner patterns were also thrown into the chambers. But what might just be my favorite loot is, funnily enough, the music discs. Precipice and especially Creator are two of the best discs in the game. I'm very comfortable putting Creator at the #1 spot. In addition to how fantastic the trial chambers are to go through, there were even a couple features added outside the structure. 20 new paintings were added to the game, many of which are some of my favorites in the entire library. But the biggest extra addition is easily the Crafter, a brand new redstone component that lets us automatically craft things. I have found this extremely useful in storing items and just automating a lot of what we had to previously do by hand. So for having perfected such an amazing new structure for the game, I think the Tricky Trials update 100% deserves to be this high. And if you disagree with that, technically this entry should also include all of the drops we have gotten since the update released, so you can keep that in mind too. I didn't want to talk about all of them since that would take forever, and I think 1.21 was plenty by itself. Also, I'm just now realizing I forgot to mention the armadillos in 1.20. They're cool. 3. 1.0 The Adventure Update Part 2. This one feels like cheating. I was honestly not sure if I wanted to include 1.0 on this list since it's literally just the full release of the game, but I would probably get a bunch of comments about it if I didn't. Don't put too much stake on where this one is placed because I could honestly understand it being #1. It just felt wrong to place it there for me. The list of new additions to this update may seem kinda small until you look at what those additions are and realize it's many of the game's core mechanics. Both enchanting and potions were added in this update, update, which are huge parts of the game. Without enchanting, Minecraft would be so much more painful to play. Along with potions, the nether fortress was also added here. That gave us a way to get both nether wart and blaze rods. The latter of the two is especially important considering this update added the stronghold, end dimension, and the ender dragon. You know, the game's final boss. This update just kind of added many people's entire goal for the game, so it absolutely had to place high up on the list if I was going to include it. Even on top of those major game-defining additions, there were plenty of smaller things too. This is one of the most quality over quantity updates in the game's history, which I think should be expected of the game's full release. I doubt anyone would argue about this placing so high up, because without it, Minecraft would genuinely be a very different game. 1.5, the redstone update. Take what I said about quality over quantity in 1.0 and apply it to this one hard. This has even less new additions than the previous update, and while I could certainly understand putting 1.0 on top, it just felt better to me to have the redstone update at the runner-up spot. Now, an update fully focused around redstone would normally not make it up this high. It's a very important part of the game and one I enjoy a lot, but most of the player base doesn't touch it outside of watching videos. However, this added a redstone component so important to the game that I think it manages to break into that more casual crowd. That would, of course, be the hopper. This feature single-handedly changed basically every single farm you could ever make in this game. Beforehand, there was no way to pick up items without the player being there. This meant that you couldn't run too many farms at once or else you would just lose the items due to despawning. With the hopper though, they could pick up anything on top of them and move it anywhere. The hopper revolutionized how powerful farming could be in this game, which is a valuable trait for all survival mode players since they're gonna need resources to build things. It's honestly kinda crazy just how much the hopper carries this update, and I don't think you could argue with just how valuable of a feature it is. But even then, the other stuff here is still extremely good. The comparator is definitely much more complicated, but also extremely useful in most redstone contraptions, allowing you to do a whole bunch of different things that you couldn't really do before, like detecting how many items are in a container, comparing signal strength, and so on. Even beside those S-tier redstone components, there's still stuff like the dropper, which is a great variant on the dispenser to help move items. The block of redstone is a very helpful power source for many contraptions. Even stuff like activator rails, trap chests, and daylight sensors have their useful niches. I still haven't seen anything with the pressure plates, but I'm sure you could find something. And if all of that wasn't enough, they didn't completely abandon builders here, as we also got quartz this update. This too is one of my favorite family of blocks that I've used constantly since their release. So no matter how you look at it, despite the lower amount of features, these are such game changers that I don't think you could place this update too much lower on the list. I genuinely can't imagine the game being nearly as fun without hoppers. Oh, and TNT minecarts. 1.16, the nether update. I think this will be a very uncontroversial number 1 spot. This took the approach of focusing on one aspect of the game and did it to the absolute max. Before this, the nether was pretty barren. There were some mobs, quartz, and nether fortresses, but it just felt very plain and underdeveloped. This is what the game absolutely needed, and they went above and beyond with it. We now have 5 nether biomes compared to just the one we had before, and they're all extremely different from one another. The Crimson and Warped Forests not only give us different color schemes, but also 2 brand new wood types. Granted, they may not be my favorite, but in the right build, they're certainly really nice to have. Basalt Deltas gave us basalt blocks and a place for magma cubes to spawn much more frequently. Soul Sand Valleys were really interesting landscapes filled with soul sand and the new soul soil. The blue sky here was an extremely nice touch, and I love the soul fire, fossils, and skeletons filling the place to make it feel distinct. The fact that you can even make soul-based lighting blocks was such a nice addition too for builders. And of course, the classic nether waste still exist, which give us a chance to not only see the updated zombified piglin, but also the brand new normal piglin. This added a whole new mechanic to the game with bartering, which is helpful for farming certain resources. I also love how they ignore you if you're wearing gold, giving some actual utility to that armor set. With the piglin, we also got the brand new bastions. These are not only filled with gold to barter with, but also a ton of other very valuable loot, most notably the Pigstep Record Disc, which is probably my second favorite. That's not to mention how the bastions themselves are made out of the brand new Blackstone family of blocks. While I personally prefer Deep Slate nowadays, this is still undeniably a useful and good looking set of blocks. I really just love how many different variations it was given. But to really round out this update and make it place strongly in the number 1 spot, we have the introduction of netherite. Diamonds had been the strongest resource in the game for over a decade at this point, so to have a new, most powerful resource was earth-shattering. I love how they implemented it too, as it still requires us to get diamond tools in order to upgrade them. Ancient debris was also extremely rare, which made us have to get creative with how we looked for it. It always feels like like a powerful accomplishment once you finally get all of your netherite gear. I also love how the block of netherite looks, even if I almost never get it in survival. And that's not even everything that was added here. There's still fantastic features like ruined portals and chains that I didn't even get to touch on. But I think it's easy to understand why this takes the top spot. Not only did it fully flesh out one of the game's 3 dimensions to make it actually feel complete, but they fundamentally changed how we have to play the game. We now have to not only explore this new nether to beat the game, but also find and use netherite if we want the best tools. So it's for all these reasons that I think 1.16 the Nether update is by far the best major update Minecraft has ever received. But anyways, that's it for this video. Do you love the chicken spawn egg and hate me for putting 1.1 in last? Let me know in the comments. This was a bit longer than I was expecting it to turn out, but I really couldn't stop myself from bringing up so many features that these updates added. Hopefully you all enjoyed this video, and hopefully I'm able to get it out close to on time. But before I go, I've got to thank my members, being Fredbear's Diner, Schmendy, Maidzo2, Magnus Larslot, Trifector, Tibby, Drybones Likes Fire Protection, wrong, Mario Master 101, Hippopotamus, Levi Strux, Nuclear, Cassie Channel, Blessed Tiger, Yanni the Duck, Wyatt Derpy, Trader Mo, Mevins 2001, Kid Trunks 15, Enchanted Skull, SMA, B Major 2003, Arson the Rat Boot, Sir Moosty, Belandor, Cinder CC, Jade Avery, Pruncel Clone, Thicky Reiki, Ungenio TM, CW McCain, JubeTube, Tesseract, Jameson Pageson, Golden Sand 15, Z Frost, Stuffy Ant, Concanut, Keep, and Christian Flattery Sequel Edition. But anyways, Drybones for Smash, and I'll see you guys next time.